Dush is a support unit with various tricks up her sleeve. This build is perfect for free-to-play since I have her at V0. For her skills, we'll start with Daybreak level 1. This is her basic attack. This is targeted. Stability damage is going to be 2. Selects one enemy target within 8 tiles and deals physical damage equal to 80% of attack to them. First active skill is targeted, called Hero's Code. This one has stability damage 2. Selects one enemy target within 8 tiles and deals physical damage equal to 110% of attack to them. If this kills an enemy unit with freeze debuffs, gain 1 stack of Ice Grace. So Ice's Grace is upon reaching 4 stacks. So take note that you need to trigger a couple of stacks for this to have more damage. Next up is going to be Marzana's Sanction. This is an active debuff and it's going to be tile. Stability damage is going to be 2. Selects one tile within 6 tiles, dealing AoE freeze damage equal to 50% of attack to all enemy targets within 2 tiles of the selected tile and generates frost for 2 turns. The next use of this will be enhanced, increasing the damage multiplier to 70% whilst applying Frigid for 1 turn. This enhancement cannot be triggered again if the skill has already been enhanced. If Confectance Index is full, Marzana's Sanction can be immediately be used again after the skill. If it causes enemy to enter stability break, applies defense down 2. So for her core active skill, this is, I think, the most important skill that you should spam because it can be repeatedly done within the same turn. As for her ultimate, Book of Prophecy, it's a buff and support. Applies 1 stack of Arctic Benediction to all allied units within 7 tiles, gains 2 points of Confectance Index, as well as Glacial Domain for 2 turns. While Glacial Domain is active, gains 2 points of Confectance Index if it is at 0 at the end of the action. So let's take a look at Arctic Benediction. So this is before you can attack or before an active attack, apply Frozen to the target, increasing damage by 10% effective once this buff cannot be cleansed, and Glacial Domain will be provide 1 instance of action support to an enemy within range when they are hit by targeted damage from an ally, dealing 80% of attack as physical damage. 2 points of stability damage as well, can trigger up to 2 times per turn and cannot be cleansed. So this is part of her skill that gives her kind of an attack support that you can add to her. Lastly, her passive, this is Blessed Artwork, increases all allied units damage by 10 with an additional 10 points specifically for freeze damage. So if you do have other dolls within your team that don't have freeze damage, they get 10, and for freeze damage dealers, they get 10, another 10. So if you're a freeze damage dealer like Makiatto, you get 20 in total. Okay, so at the end of the action, gains 2 points of Confectance Index. When the user's HP is above 80%, reduce stability damage taken by 1 point and gains Insight. While under the effects of Insight, increases the range of active skill and support attacks except ultimates by 1 tile. For her weapon options, we have here KSVK. It's a free-to-play option and it's SR. We have Hour of Judgment level 1. Deal damage to enemy targets on freeze tiles is increased by 10%. Another free-to-play option, which you can get from the shop, is going to be Samosek. So Samosek has Keep It Up level 1. Phase damage is increased by 10 and electric damage is increased by another 10. If you have an extra Bittersweet Caramel lying around, please equip it with Dush. So Art of Eradication level 1, increase freeze damage dealt by 10% for every 4 instances of damage dealt outside of own turn, increase damage dealt by the next active attack by 10%. Her best weapon would be Eulogistic Verse. So Winner Takes All level 1, when the user has Insight, increase damage dealt by 10% before an allied unit makes an active attack. If the target has a freeze debuff, increase the freeze damage dealt by 5%. If the target has Frigid, this damage increases to enhanced to 10%. For attachments and stat priority, please go with Flat Attack, which is this one, Attack Boost, Crit Rate, and Crit Damage. Fortification recommendations for Dush are either V0 or go all the way to V6. But let's take a look at all the segments so that you have an overview of what you'll be adding. Okay, starting off with segment 1 or V1, Book of Prophecy increases the effective range by 2 tiles and applies 1 random powerful buff and moving up 2 to all allied units within range for 2 turns. Arctic Benediction increases damage dealt by an additional 10%. So the first one will give you additional buffs to her ultimate. Next one is going to be at segment 2 or V2. Attack ignores 15% of the target's cover damage reduction at the start of the action, generates frost tiles within a tile radius around the user for 2 turns. If the user is standing on an allied freeze tile, their stability damage is increased by 1 point. Segment 3, Marzana's Sanction, effective range is increased by 1 tile. The initial damage multiplier is increased by 70%. This will be further increased by 90% for the enhanced skill. Segment 4 or V4, the number of Ice's Gray stacks gain increase by 1. When the number of stacks reach 4, the skill's effect is enhanced, increasing the damage dealt to 140%. If the target is on an allied freeze tile, the damage dealt increases to 160. Segment 5 or V5 cleanses 1 buff from 4 random enemy units within range. Increase the number of Arctic Benediction stacks applied by 1 while Glacial Domain is active. Ignores 30 of the target's defense. The maximum number of support attacks is increased by 1. And the last one, which is segment 6 or V0, increase the damage of active attacks by 20% with an additional 40% boost for freeze damage. After an active attack, cleanses 1 defensive buff from the target. If the user is standing on an allied freeze tile, applies vulnerable 2 to the target for 2 turns. For her Neural Helix, we'll start off with her common key, Artistic Inspiration. Attack boost is going to be 5% for targets which mobility is less than or equal to the user or that cannot move. Increase face damage dealt by 10%. This, however, cannot be used by Dush. This is best used by Makiatto, so we will go directly to her key regulation. For her fixed keys as a support, the first one is going to be Courageous Claymore. When using Marzana's Sanction, if it causes the target to enter stability break, applies defense down 2 to them for 2 turns. Second is going to be Magical Support. When an active skill generates freeze tiles, if there are freeze tiles that already exist within range, triggers a tile reaction, removes a tile beneath the enemy targets, and cleanses 1 buff from them. For each tile removed, gains 1 stack of Ice's Grace up to 3 stacks. And the last fixed key is going to be Adventurer's Will. When an active attack only hits 1 target, increases freeze damage dealt by 20% and stability damage dealt by 2 points. For her common keys or universal keys, I'm mainly using crit damage, attack boost, and health boost. Another option for a common key is going to be All-Seeing Eye. When this unit is under the effect of Insight, increases damage dealt by 7%. This is the common key of Mosin Nagant. For your team options and synergy, Dush is a support for the Ice team and is going to be bonkers if you pair her off with Makiatto. Since Makiatto, especially if you've got her at V6, Dush is going to be a great addition to your Ice team, especially if you're using that team for Gunsmoke Frontline. So again, guys, thank you very much for staying this far. Comment down in the comment section what you think. Stay safe, take care. This is the Warden, and I'm out of here.